Welcome to Asian Horror Stories, where the shadows whisper and the unknown lurks just beyond your sight. From ancient curses to forgotten legends, every tale unravels the dark secrets hidden in the heart of Asia. Are you ready to step into the nightmare? The story we are going to tell today is The Night I Went Home, but it wasn't my family. Most of the time, what we consider paranormal is merely a product of coincidence and illusion. What I am about to share, I can only guarantee that every word is true. As for whether I truly encountered a ghost, I can only say that I sincerely hope I didn't. I just want to tell this story. It was around 2002. The exact time is an estimate. I only remember that I was in the second grade. On Chinese New Year's Eve, my family gathered at my aunt's house for a reunion dinner. At the time, I lived in an old-style apartment building with 4 floors. My grandfather and I lived on the first floor, while my aunt's family lived on the 4th. I never liked that place. The lighting was terrible, and I remember the bedroom being perpetually cold and dark. Around 6 or 7 in the evening, I was playing downstairs. My mother came out, locked the door, and said, "Play for a while, I'll call you up later. We'll have dinner at 8. I replied, "Okay." It felt like a long time had passed. The sky had turned completely dark, but no one came to call me. Luckily, there were street lights downstairs. I was getting tired, so I decided to go up myself. That was when a boy approached me. I don't remember his exact features. He wasn't much older than me, perhaps a 5th or 6th grader. "Hey kid," he said, "let me see that toy in your hand." He was referring to my Train Hero toy, one of those plastic toys that came with cheap snacks. I thought he wanted to play with me, so I handed it over. Then he asked for more of my toys. However, I had always treated my toys like treasures, so I refused. Then, without a word, he turned around and ran away with my toy. Yes, he ran. That was the first time in my life I had ever been robbed. I hurriedly chased after him, but I lost sight of him at a turning point in the alley. I was so useless, I burst into tears. I wanted to go home, so I returned to my apartment building. Here's a strange detail. When I reached the ground floor, I knocked on my own door. I knew no one was home. My mother had clearly told me to go to my aunt's place. Yet, for some reason, I knocked anyway, as if something compelled me to. Then, after confirming that no one was inside, I told myself, "Okay, they must all be at my aunt's place," and I headed upstairs. My aunt's home was on the 4th floor. The stairway was dimly lit. I held onto the railing and walked for what felt like an eternity before finally reaching the door. I knocked. The door swung open almost instantly. It was my mother. Her hair was tied up. I immediately ran into her arms, crying about how my toy had been stolen. She comforted me for a while before leading me inside. That's when I noticed something felt off. My aunt's living room always had white lights, but that night they were yellow. And only the living room light was on. The dim yellow glow made the house feel incredibly eerie. I asked my dad, "Why aren't the other lights on?" My father suddenly snapped at me with an unfamiliar harshness. "Mind your own business, kid." In that moment, he felt like a complete stranger. My father had a bad temper, but he had never spoken to me like that before. I felt so wrong that I started crying again. And then something happened that terrifies me to this day. The once lively chatter in the house ceased entirely. Every single person, my parents, my relatives, turned their heads in unison and stared at me. They said nothing. They just stared, blank-faced. The yellow light flickered eerily. I stood frozen in place. After what felt like forever, my mother finally spoke. "Let's eat." And just like that, everyone resumed their normal behavior. But I was still in shock. I sat at the table in a daze. Even as a child, I knew something was terribly wrong. Then I noticed the TV. It was pure static. I turned to my mother sitting beside me and asked, "Why is there nothing on the TV?" She responded coldly, "It's broken." My father, who had been quietly eating, suddenly snapped his head up and gave me a deathly glare, a look filled with nothing but rage and hatred. That man was not my father. I swallowed hard and said, "Mom, I left my toy downstairs. I need to go get it." My aunt suddenly said, "It's dark outside. Let your brother go with you." "No need," I quickly replied, standing up and heading for the door. As I turned my back to them, I felt their eyes on me. They were all watching me, and none of them spoke. I trembled as I reached the door, pulled it open, and slammed it behind me. Then I ran. That feeling had haunted me for years. As I ran downstairs, I heard the door upstairs creak open. I was so terrified that I started sobbing, but no one chased me. I kept running all the way to the street. There weren't many people around. Then, at a corner, I saw my mother. Her hair was loose, hanging over her shoulders, just like how she always wore it. For some reason, I knew that she was my real mother. I ran straight into her arms. She was furious, but seeing how terrified I was, she didn't scold me. Instead, she asked, "Where did you go? We've been looking for you for so long." I realized then I had never been at my aunt's house. I was too scared to explain. My entire body was shaking. My mother, seeing my condition, hurriedly took me home. That New Year's Eve, I didn't eat a single bite. When I finally told my family what had happened, their faces turned pale. My father's side of the family firmly believed in the supernatural, and my mother was visibly horrified. A few years later, we moved into a new house. I rarely went back to that place. The fear lingered in my heart like a shadow. Even now, when I think of that dim, yellow-lit living room and the expressionless faces of my family, my chest tightens. I still don't know if that night was just a dream, or if I had encountered something else entirely. This is the story we tell. The night I went home, but it wasn't my family.